Everybody knows that Preacher Dude rocks, and everybody knows that Arcane is a show that's on Netflix. It's by Riot. You've heard of them. Riot Games, League of Legends, Legends of Runeterra, Valorant. They make the games and the such. But apparently, they also make music, and apparently, they also make shows. And that's what I saw. And this is my review for Arcane Season 1. I'm not even gonna pretend. I don't play League, and League does not interest me. And it doesn't interest me for many reasons. It is uninteresting to me in more ways than one. I'll admit, MOBAs are quasi-interesting to me, but my interest for them is tangential. I've enjoyed an Age of Empires, so I don't mind looking down on a map and having to control things, but from what I've heard and from what I've seen, the League of Legends scene is just not for me. But who knows? Maybe one day I'll play it. And honestly, after Arcane, after KDA, and things of the such and the like, Riot really is doing any and all things possible to pull in whoever into their fan base. I have no reason to be here. I have no reason to belong. Mostly because I don't want to. Mostly I'm built a certain way. I have my, predestined, preordained preferences. I have my socialized preferences, but nonetheless, all of these things are valid, and a MOBA-like League just isn't what really speaks to me. But you know what does? Boy, just like any gacha, just like any MOBA, just like any anime that I find myself on the fence on, boy, do these waifus, and really to be entirely clear, character design. But to be entirely clear, the waifus, boy, do these waifus draw me in. And for the longest time, what I knew about League could be summarized in that I thought Jinx was hot. Among other people. There's Ari, there's Miss Fortune, there's, did I say Ari already? Look, it's less about knowing them name by name and more that, in a way, their character designs speak for themselves. I've seen the chick in the bunny suit. I know that's not her real skin or her main skin, but I know that popped off, and everybody on the internet, including myself, is a fan of that look. I've seen the pizza girl. I know that's not their default skin, but we've all seen the skin. And we've all seen the cosplay. And I think that's my point in all of this. Riot understands that they have great characters. And it turns out that they have great characters, so much so, to a T, that the lore and the actual origin, their story behind each and every one of their characters, seems like a deep well of potential. As it pertains to Arcane, I think that's honestly one of the best things going for it. Crazy enough, second only to the animation. When it comes to the positives I have in mind for this show, the animation and the show's characters are hand in hand. The animation is like nothing else. And when I say nothing else, I'll admit, it reminds me of course, Spider-Verse, right? The Miles Morales tale, the feature film, the animated feature film. What do we take away from a movie like that? Oh yeah, shout out Sony. They're, putting to use all these unique animation techniques, animating in 1s and 2s and not doing traditional camera blurs, rather invoking comic polka dot textures and chromatic aberration and 2D things on 3D. All these things serve to give this movie a living comic book aesthetic. But what I do like about Arcane is that in a way it is like that, but like nothing else. Because it doesn't look like Spider-Verse. It doesn't look like a living comic book. I haven't played the damn game, and even I can tell as soon as I watch the trailer for Arcane that it's like a character portrait, wallpaper, whatever the hell, come to life. It's all the energy that goes into rendering that beautiful illustration for that champion, but you made it move. And no, it doesn't look like a live 2D tween, skeleton kind of thing. It's pretty clear that everything is 3D modeled, but just whatever sort of lighting and rendering that they're using in their 3D spaces is something beyond cell shading. I'll admit, a nitpick I had with the animation is that sometimes I felt certain things were done on twos for no reason. If you're not familiar, animating on ones and twos pertains to how many frames you're giving something. And basically, if you're animating on twos, you're doing half the frame rate. Typically a cost-cutting measure, but in something like this, it's less of a budgeting issue and more of an aesthetic decision. It's supposed to kind of communicate, hey, this is kind of like it's animated traditionally. And honestly, I have nothing against that mix of traditional and modern or unconventional or whatever. I like it most when there's speed lines and when there's explosions and for a second it's all white and all you see is a hazy sketch of the silhouettes. That I do love because it gives a sort of bend and life to everything. But every now and then I'd be taken out of the experience when there'd be a certain fire and the smoke, unlike everything else on screen, is at half the frame rate. I don't think that serves anything from the game and anything about the aesthetic. Like I said, I think its strongest point is that it doesn't commit to like the comic book Spider-Verse thing or even vintage cartoon thing, because it's none of those things. It's League. League runs at a higher frame rate on your computer. All these elements that you would see in game are running at whatever peak frame rate that shit goes at. But again, it's a nitpick. In line with the animation, the combat, the fighting, the facial expressions, I find these to be two sides of the same coin in that they both serve certain aspects of the story. For example, with the facial animation, I don't know how much facial tracking was involved or if it was all referential, but I really felt like a tick in the eyebrow or a sudden movement in the eye or a quivering of the lip or a clasping of the mouth all reached me. I caught them. I could tell that the show wasn't cutting any corners and that when something was supposed to be emotional in whatever direction, it really hit these 3D models like it would a human. Damn near. But there weren't any dead eyes, any lazy eyes, any soulless faces, none of that. And these sort of micro movements, micro behaviors just really sell the idea that these are real people, that these characters are real on screen. Like I said, combat is the other side of this coin. And in the fighting scenes, boy, no pun intended, were any punches pulled? No. Often what you see with 3D animation is that certain things get stiff in terms of the flow, the movement, the weight of things, physics. People will get punched and they'll kind of fly away like they're on a wire. It's unfortunate, but even live action movies suffer from this sort of thing, where they just can't convey a realistic or an expected sense of motion, the consequence of the hits. But in Arcane, it's different. It doesn't matter if someone's punching with a gauntlet or someone's wrestling or tearing through someone or shooting or hauling a grenade or whatever may have you. Every hit, every tussle, every ricochet seems to have a true consequence. Things are choreographed well, and honestly, yet another aspect of the animation that's in tandem with the fighting is that really these things are shot not only clearly, but with a sort of ingenuity, or you can say recent taste, that action films have garnered as of late. Things that come to mind, the idea of wrestling someone and having that person fall over as the camera tracks them. In general, I felt like the camera in Arcane was decently live action. It was not framed like a cartoon or even an animated movie all the time. I'm glad they used realistic blurs and dust textures on the lens and whatnot. But yeah, even in their style of following their characters, at times things felt handheld. So yes, all of these things in the animation sell what you're looking at. That's why animation is first and foremost in terms of a positive for Arcane. The second thing that comes to mind, like I said, it's characters. Again, I don't really know shit about these League characters. When I watched Arcane, I watched it with some League friends, but I definitely was in this bitch alone. Honestly, I didn't even know that Jinx herself was someone that turns crazy. I've got to be quite honest right now. I'm just ruminating on whether or not crazy is the appropriate word for this. She has her trauma. I had no idea Jinx had her trauma. I had no idea that there were these legitimate things that made her quote unquote crazy. To be honest, I didn't even realize that that was a part of her character. I didn't take her for anything more than just, I guess, like a Juri from Street Fighter. Just a kind of like yandere type, you know, someone who is a little loose on morality and gets away with most things because they're fucking hot. You've done nothing wrong, baby. So watching this show and seeing her evolution from Powder to Jinx, even with them skipping that sort of middle ground, that bridge of when did she make the decision to become who she becomes, it all felt real. It felt fleshed out. And I think this is something that you can say about most of the characters in Arcane. Everybody feels fleshed out. It reminds me a lot of how my experience with Eternals was. These are all new people to me. It's a cast of 17,326 people. But I know exactly how each one of them bounces off of each other. In Arcane, I feel like even the people that we have with us for as short of a time as we do, they get their chance to show what they're like and what they are in relation to other people on the show. Honestly, when it comes to Jinx's evolution, I think it was a great decision to skip this sort of bridge in terms of her becoming who she becomes. It's kind of like not showing the monster in a horror movie. You take a little bit of the mystery away, you take all of the horror away. And with Jinx, I feel just letting you know that what happened to her was of major consequence, and then getting to the point where you see how far that snowball rolls, somehow you are both left with, I believe that, and how the hell did she get there? And I think that in between, seeing how, or not being able to see how she digested those things, is what kind of lets the monster persist in Jinx. Not that I really think that she is inherently evil or anything, but she's certainly broken. I think in a way she views herself as a monster, and some people definitely view her as a monster. And honestly, part of her self-acceptance in the show, or at least her struggle with it, is kind of doing away with the notion that she is that. I think the voice acting was pretty stellar all the way through, pretty much for everybody that comes to mind. I'm sorry that I'm not naming people name by name and their characters name by name, but just know that I'm just painting a picture of my positive impression, and it's thoroughly positive. Hearing Jinx and Vi go back to back was pretty much peak show for me. I will say, as a nitpick, I feel like I didn't get as much as I would want from their back and forths, but every time it happened, it was wonderful. Yes, several times in the show, I was thinking to myself, damn, I haven't seen Jinx in a while. Or wow, I haven't seen Vi in a while. But every time they're on screen together, it's magic. I forget the villain's name. Is it Silco? Is that the company that he's with or whatever? I forget. Daddy bad guy. I think the way that they portrayed him is pretty interesting. All in all, well written, but I think what's sort of compelling is that he kind of straddles the fence on straight up evil and evil with a good cause. I mean, in general, he doesn't believe he's a villain. He doesn't do these things because he wants to give people a hard time necessarily. A certain part of it is that he just believes that this is the way of the world. And on top of that, you have the compounding aspect of him just trying to be, I guess, a good father to Jinx. So all that's there, but at the same time, you really can't brush off the fact that he's doing a lot of terrible things, and that it kind of takes an evil person to stomach those kind of decisions. But I guess what comes to the forefront concerning his character is how he bounces off of Jinx specifically, and vice versa. I guess you could say they have a daughter-daddy relationship. And honestly, I wouldn't say daughter-father relationship, because it's kind of like that, specifically with those terms, daughter-daddy. I don't know if it's just me, but I think there's this intentionality behind having him show genuine care, or at least fainting that, for Jinx, looking out for her, being quote-unquote in her best interest, but being constantly put in positions. I say put from the perspective of the writers, but you know, maybe he's the one placing himself in these positions where there's a hint of sexuality in their dynamic. Things that come to mind are how Jinx would sort of sit on his lap, and it's not necessarily as a child would. I guess there's a part of me that like recognizes that if he were sick in that way, so as to take advantage of a daughter in spirit, that the opportunity is totally there. And I think honestly, that's not to say that I know that that's what he is. I just think that Riot did this for his character to kind of show you that even in that sense, he's straddling the line. There's some kisses, touches, and like I said, even sort of straddling on Jinx's part on bad guy that all serve that notion. It's kind of like a subtle way of reminding us that maybe, he was entirely good for her, even despite how bad he was for everybody else. Or maybe he was just holding out. He just hadn't gotten to the bad he could have been for her. And for real, all in all, if the chick needs help, if she needs a father, if she needs a therapy, if she needs a love, I'm glad you're being a stand-in, my nigga, but she does not need to be doing these odd jobs for you. So I hate to break it to you, you're not helping your daughter. I guess to give a chance for my negatives on the show, things that come up aren't necessarily resounding, but I think I've done a good enough job at painting that I'm positive on the show, that you guys can walk away from this understanding that I'm still capable of liking the show while not liking certain aspects of it. I think the season still ended in a I can't wait what happens next episode way, not necessarily I can't wait to see what happens next season way. I'm literally curious what happens next season because the season was good, but not because I feel like I have this sense that a whole season's worth of an arc is on the way from what we see in the show. It's more like, okay, so that thing blew up. Did they die? Can't wait to find out next episode. Like I said, I feel like certain people in certain dynamics should have had more screen time. There are certain things about the animation I wouldn't have greenlit. And honestly, while I found the plot decently riveting, it's not like I had my jaw dropped for any specific moment. It all felt decently plausible. Not to say expected, but just like, right. Of course that would happen. I realize there's a couple things in this show that I'm not able to appreciate as a non-League fan. Oh, so that's Warwick. Oh, so that's so-and-so's mask. I don't really care. I've never been ARAM in the jungle and with a TFT or whatever. But look, man, the show's good. I've tried to avoid spoilers, so I'm not gonna call this a spoiler review, but I think you should see it. It had enough of a hook on someone like me who's not even necessarily a League fan, but between how it looks, how it plays out, and literally the music it plays, shout out the soundtrack, can't stop playing the theme song for this show, I swear. Arcane has a lot of things going for it, and it honestly shits on a lot of other shows out there of similar effort, or at least ambition. And yeah, honestly, I think Riot has done a good job at finding another way that doesn't include their video game League of Legends for me to want to look into how hot I think Jinx is. Of course, I'm being a reductionist here, but honestly, go in for whatever reason you want, and I'll think you'll leave the show with 2 or 3 more reasons to love those characters you love. Anyway, see you guys next time. You already know who it is. PDR, like, comment, subscribe, all that shit. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Come again.